Hi all. Our little monthly discussion for this week and for this week, um, and we've invited along Amy Reese, who is Harold Floyd does a lot of training with us and bits and pieces in terms of mental health awareness and mental health first aid and stuff like that. But Amy is his lovely wife, long suffering. But we thought it'd be really interesting just to kind of throw a slant on it, really. The topic that we're going to kind of approach this month is it difficult to be a man? And so we thought just to throw a slant on it, we'd get a lady involved just to kind of ask the questions and push things. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Also, I just want to say, don't feel like you need to alter your answers because I am a woman. Like, say what you want to say. It's fine.
Oh, no one here will.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. No.
I assume it might, but I thought I would just say it just in case. You never know.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So who are we going to pick on first then? Should we pick on Dan first?
Pick on Dan first. Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Do you know what? I was thinking about this the other day because I'm getting really, really bored because the term masculinity, and I'm always being asked whether it's hard to be arguably a masculine man or is it hard to be a man in 2023. As a man, yes, I do. I do think it's getting harder and harder and harder and harder. But I think more so because the term toxic masculinity and masculinity are being entwined massively. And I think what that's doing is that's just silencing blokes. Because it does feel very, very bizarre. It just feels weird that because I like engines, because I like racing motorbikes, because I like tools, because I kind of do that masculine stuff, wild camping, I've noticed that I started to be pigeonholed into that. What's your opinion of Andrew Tate? Do you support Andrew Tate? No, I think he's a prick. But do you get what I mean? I just seem to be
great fighter.
Yeah, no, it's just because like you with the husky stuff, because I'm just a bloke, arguably seen as masculine, then I must be part of the Andrew.
The husky stuff really doesn't come into it because that is completely and utterly unisex.
Is it?
Yeah, completely, yeah. And even down to teams, the boys and girls in teams. Kind of has a little bit of bearing, I suppose, on very small teams, but on larger teams, it doesn't make a jot of difference. And we've got as many female champions as we've got male champions. It's not about whether you're a boy or a girl at all, in any way, shape, or form.
And this is why you should never presume.
Well, no, you shouldn't. No.
Well, there you go.
You just did, and you've been told off.
Yeah, and I've just corrected myself, haven't I? So I think, just going back and say, I think personally, yeah, I do think it's hard to be a man in 2023. There seems to be like a tarn on it. But also on the other hand, because I literally do this, it feels like day in, day out. This feels like my full-time job sometimes. I see a lot of other people's perspectives. So maybe my perspective has been skewed by other people's.
Quite possibly. Explain the term toxic masculinity in case there are people on here who don't, or people watching that don't really kind of get it.
Okay, well, masculinity is arguably the stereotypical masculine bloke. Michael, I know you did a good video on that the other day, but the stereotypical one is like engines, like beer and all this kind of stuff, which is actually a load of part. I'm more of a ale wine drinker and all this kind of stuff. Do you get me? So masculinity is just anybody who just likes to do blokey stuff. Toxic masculinity are pricks. They're the people who don't respect women, who just like feel the burn, like destroy everything to be that alpha kind of bloke. They're pricks.
Okay.
So I think the toxic masculinity is when you're trying to enforce that stereotype on men. Yeah. Like, you're not a man unless you are this way or do this way or like these things or behave in that way. But you're saying that the stereotype of masculinity is confused with toxic masculinity. So you feel like you're judged for liking manly things, basically, or manly things.
Yeah, no, without question. And there's been a couple of videos. There was one with a load of power lifters, and they've done a fundraiser. They've done really, really well, and it surprised me. But even with there, I said, "Oh, you live in a toxic masculinity world." And there's been a couple of videos where I meant to say masculine, in the typical masculine world. But even me, and this is where I think maybe sometimes I'm the wrong person to ask that question, because my views might be manipulated by the people I speak to.
I think it happens a lot with actually mental health in general. A lot of the terms are overused and then you become desensitized to it, and the meaning of what it actually is gets lost. So when you talk about stress, like someone has a bit of pressure and they're like, oh, I'm really stressed. Like, are you actually stressed, or is you're losing the actual meaning of the words?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the same as like anxious. It's like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious. I've got mental health problems. Actually, no, anxiety, being anxious about something, or being mildly worried about something is a human. It's a human
That's
thing.
just normal, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sometimes we're grumpy. Sometimes we just feel a little bit down. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes if you don't talk to the people around you about just just having a bit of a shit day, feeling down, that can absolutely escalate into bigger problems. Actually, some of it is just being a human.
But to my mind, anxiety is um so in its like in its merest form, you might have, in my case, a site launch the following day. In Sam's, he might have a big catering event that he's got to do with some really important people or something like that. So you're worried about, or you're anxious about it. But proper anxiety, as we're talking about it in mental health terms, actually stops you from doing stuff. That's where it just absolutely floors you. So rather than just being worried about, well, tomorrow I'll get on and do it and it'll be okay, and proper anxiety will actually stop you going out, talking to people. Would I be correct in that?
Well,
think
that's sorry, that's why I'm on amitriptyline.
Okay.
Because my anxiety can go so batshit crazy sometimes. It I can't focus on anything else. I'm like, it's literally for me just feels like doom and gloom, and I can't get past that.
Mm.
And this is why I take amitriptyline, because it just helps me control that.
Sam, well, I mean, you go down and do this cold water dipping every morning and so on in the North Sea, and I was going to say you got bigger balls than me, but probably in that water you haven't.
Not in
And
that water.
and actually, that's kind of not what it's about anyway. But I mean, in your job, or which predominantly could be, as a chef, could be predominantly male orientated, I suppose.
Mm.
But even your stuff, your cold water dipping, down on the beach, do you see any masculinity? I mean, is there anything that, well, I'm a bloke, I should be able to put up with the cold water, as against women?
That's interesting. When you mentioned the cold water, I spoke to Dan about it before. What I found very interesting is when I started up that challenge and people were messaging me, there was a lot of insecurity around blokes, which you wouldn't expect, and from blokes that you wouldn't normally expect to be insecure. They said they want to come down and do the dips, but they were worried about getting their bodies out. So it's an important point you bring up, and I was very insecure. That was one of the reasons I started it. I was very insecure about my body, but about how I was in front of people and that as well. So I could relate to a lot to these blokes, and you'd normally relate insecurities for whatever reason to just being women with body and that. But
I was going to say that's far more
yeah.
what you would typically call a female trait.
Yeah, but that's one thing I learned. Well, I learned a lot from that challenge, but that was one of the biggest things I learned as well. Actually, men do have massive insecurities about their body images and that.
I think that's a big part of it as well, is if the stereotype is that men are confident, men don't care what they look like when, they're on the beach or whatever, then if you're a man and you think, well, actually, I don't feel comfortable, but you think that you should and you have to, that's where the toxicity comes into it, I think. If you're like, well, actually, it's okay to not be confident. Not everybody is confident, and look at people as individuals rather than, well, you're meant to be a man or you're meant to be a woman and this is how you're meant to be.
Absolutely. And it was funny because we all worry about our insecurities and everything, but no one's bothered about yours because they're worrying about their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, but going back to what you said as well before, in the kitchen, my worries and anxieties at work are completely different to my ones in normal life as well. When you've got an event on and everything, you're naturally going to be worried and slightly anxious. But I started off the cold water because I was health anxiety, a hypochondriac, and that. So it's two different things, you know. So you deal with different. You use tools. Like I use the cold water to deal with my health anxiety, my panic disorder, and all that. But with normal anxiety, you just take a few deep breaths. There's different types of anxieties and different types of worries and everything, and it's about learning how to deal with each individual one, I think.
Michael, you've been very quiet so far.
Yes, I have. I was being polite and taking turns.
No, we're not. No, we're not polite in here, I'm afraid. Crack on.
So I suppose my experience of is it hard being a man in 2023 probably be a bit different. I suppose it's maybe because I'm gay, I've not always been seen by people as the stereotypical man, or there's not been that expectation. And actually trying to find my own identity, I suppose, as a man has been a bit tricky, because I felt like I've not fitted into the typically sort of masculine box. No one can really accuse me of being toxically masculine, I think, because my hobbies have never been particularly masculine. I've never been able to convincingly be a lad. But then again, I'm not particularly feminine either. So I've had it from both angles where I felt like I've needed to conform to being a man, and failed. But then again, I've had one of the things that used to bug me was people would be women saying, "Oh, I've always wanted a gay best friend. We can go out shopping." Well, first of all, I don't want to be an accessory like a handbag so you can have a gay best friend. And I bloody hate shopping just because that isn't fun. So I felt like I've struggled to fit into either box. I'm slightly masculine, I'm slightly feminine. And I think society sometimes has these expectations of you as a man and these expectations of you as a woman as well. And I think it's probably hard for men and for women to meet those expectations, because at the end of the day, we're all just people. We have different qualities that might not match up with either of these gender stereotypes. And I think times are changing. I think society's allowing people to be themselves more rather than having to conform to a set of stereotypes. But there's a long way to go. And the whole toxic masculinity thing, that's I find there is a lot of gym culture. There's a lot of culture at the moment that says that to be a man, you have to get up early and go to the gym, and you have to be at your peak fitness, and that in order to prosper, you've got to exhaust yourself. I think that's slightly it can be slightly damaging, because at the same time we've got an epidemic of men misusing steroids. And that's because men are insecure about their bodies. They're insecure about being good enough, and they're trying to find shortcuts. So, but men, one of the traits of masculinity is that you're not supposed to have vulnerabilities, are you? It's okay to be vulnerable as a woman, but to be vulnerable about anything as a man is frowned upon. It's not masculine. So I think that's why a lot of men don't talk about it, because it's shown as weakness, and you're not supposed to be weak as a man. But we're all human at the end of the day, and we do have weaknesses. It's just whether we choose to show them and whether we wish to talk about them. So yeah, I haven't got the answer yet. I think times are changing. I'm finding it easier just to be myself now and not care what people think about my masculinity or otherwise. And
do you think that that's the kind of a general public perception now, because we've got so much of the kind of the Sam Smith and bits and pieces like that from kind of flying around, that almost being kind of dare I say kind of gay and not really fitting into either the female mold or the male mold is just general now? Or so do you think it's a public perception, or do you think it's the fact that you're now at a stage in your life where you think, I am what I am, you know, if you can't take it, then that's your problem, it's not my problem, and you're just happy to crack on with that?
I think for me it's very much the latter. I've stopped giving a shit about quite a lot of things in the last couple of years, but principally I've stopped giving. I've stopped caring about what others think of me. I'm just going to be myself, and if you like that, then great. If you don't, well, it's no worry to me now. I don't need you necessarily. I don't need to be friends with everyone. I don't need to impress everyone. If I'm competent, if I'm happy being myself, and if I love myself, then I'm never going to be alone. But what I have found is that just by being authentic in myself, I attract people who, I allow people to see who I am, and that attracts the sort of people that are good to
you want to hang around with.
Yeah, because I'm not. There's no facade anymore.
Yep.
I think blokes are getting better as well at talking, whereas women have always been good at talking and supporting each other. And like Michael said before, blokes aren't very good at that. It's an ego thing, isn't it? When I was at my lowest, I never wanted to tell anyone. I wanted to pretend that everything was all right because it was an ego thing. It was a sign of weakness, weren't it? That you felt like you were being weak by not opening up and talking to your mate. So when you did feel bad, you'd put on a fake smile and say everything's all right. But men, I think now there has been with things like this, talking about it and opening up and leading by example, I think other blokes have been like, yeah, we can talk about it. And now if anything's bothering me, I can open up to me mates, and I'm not bothered about it because I know it'll be very beneficial, not only for me, but the bloke that I'm talking to as well, because we're all going through something. And I think that's where women have been better at it for years, been able to get the support and communication from their fellow friends. And we've been naff at it, but things are starting to change. And I think you can see that. And hopefully the more blokes do start to talk about it, you might start to see them numbers coming down, because obviously like 75% of suicides and that are blokes, and there's a reason for that, because the lack of communication.
Do you find, Sam, that you've got kind of, you know, 2 or 3 or half a dozen or whatever mates that you feel that you can really open up to very, very easily, or do you think it's your whole group of friends?
Yeah, you get to a certain point, I think, where you give in what you draw out, so you end up becoming. I've said it loads of times, but when I was drinking and taking drugs all the time, I was hanging around with people that are taking drugs. But when now on this self-healing or whatever it is, like you find people on the same path, so you naturally come across people that you can find it easily to open up to, because they're on the same journey as you, so to speak, you know. So yeah, but I've got a very good relationship that I've rebuilt with my family, who I can open up to. I'm very close to my brother, and I've got a good couple of friends in that as well. But even just people that I meet in the meetings I go to and that, because they've been through the same shit that you've been through, and they've lived walked the same path and everything, you find that instant connection, and you can open up and talk to each other, and as if you've known each other your whole life. It's very bizarre, but very rewarding as well, because that's where the growth is. When you start talking to people that have been through that stuff as well, you start to ping up, your mind starts working, you start pinging off each other, and then you start answering the questions you've been trying to ask yourself for years. And when you're going at it alone, you haven't got them answers, because you're just on your own. When you communicate with someone else, the answers come to you through communication.
Do you think you have good success because when people come to you, I don't know, an ex-raging alcoholic and all this kind of stuff, they come to you in their recovery because they know you're not going to judge them and you'll understand it. Like I've been quite vocal overnight. Like, actually, do you know what? I've detested alcoholics all of my life because of my uncle and all this. I've seen some horrible things, but because I don't know, I'm going to start pointing at the pen now, so I apologise. But because of people like you and Michael, I've started to change my perspective. So well done to both of you for that. I've started to see alcohol or retired alcoholics as humans.
It's about breaking the stigma, and I think that's what Micheal does very well, and he inspires me to do the same. And it's no one asked to be that way. No one woke up one day and thought, "Oh, I want to be struggling with drinking drugs." Do you know what I mean? It was a much bigger thing, and I think once you start to crack it yourself, like I'm never going to be 100%. It's something I've got to work on for the rest of my life. But once you start to do that and you realise, shit, there's people that are in the situation you was in, you have this overwhelming like urgency to help them people because you know how shit it was. Yeah. And you don't want anyone to be where you was at. You know what I mean? There's different circumstances with all individuals. That's what we're going back to the whole point of this. We say about is it hard being a man? Well, it depends. Depends what situation you're in. There's loads of different men, isn't there? We done a podcast, me and Jack, the other day with someone who, and looking back, it was a similar to my story. When I first split up with my ex through for fault of my own, but it was very difficult and sent me into even more of a spiral because not only am I not seeing my kids as much, you're paying the mother quite a bit of money and you're having to go to work and you're not seeing your children, paying a lot of money out, and that situation is difficult for a man because you want to ideally be with your kids all the time and have a bit more money. Do you know what I mean? There's different circumstances, but there's so many different scenarios. It depends what man you're talking about. Is how difficult life is, really, doesn't it? Not.
Yeah. Well,
Amy, what are your feelings on this?
So obviously the thing that I kind of get from this, and I feel you see a lot of people from different backgrounds saying that I've seen it a few times where people have said, well, you've got it easy because you're a white male. And not to me personally, because I'm a female.
I was going to say, right, yeah, go on.
I have said that to me because you're white, you're white, you have, advantages. But the thing, like you're saying, every single individual has different challenges in their life. So I think regardless of whether you're a male, whether you're a female, whether you're white, whether you have different things, everybody has an individual circumstance with different situation and different challenges. So I think that there's definitely, if you look at the stereotypes of what's expected from a man and a woman, there are challenges for both, but they generally are different. But I don't think that minimizes the challenges that each individual person faces. I can see challenges that men have, and I can see challenges that individuals have. And I think that the thing that frustrates me is when it becomes a comparison, because I don't think you can compare.
Yeah.
And that's not just with both sexes, that's with any individual as well. Like I look at the old me as a different bloke, and would you say that it was difficult for him to be a man? Yes, because he couldn't open up and talk to people. The man I am today, is it difficult to be a man? No different to what it is to anyone else. Like life's hard sometimes, life's good sometimes. It's the same for everyone, and everyone everyone on the planet has an advantage and some disadvantage.
I think you've hit a nail on. Me personally, it's just if every single person just keep their mind open and look through the stereotypical person. So, for example, again, like I've always hated alcoholics purely because of a past thing with an uncle and all this kind of stuff. It was arguably traumatic. I've never actually said that on MANUP before, so that was always my perspective. Actually, because I've started watching originally, that was you, and Micheal, you just cracked me up with your content. It's just absolutely brilliant. You've changed my perspective, but the only way you've been able to change my perspective is for me to not look at the stereotype. Oh, these are ex-piss heads and all this kind of. I've got no time.
Well, it's for you to actually give it the space for somebody to talk to you and explain what they've done, where they're coming from, and where they're going to.
Yeah, no, go on, sorry, Amy.
When people do share their experiences, so although somebody might not have been through what you've been through, it allows people to understand and show empathy.
Absolutely. That's why it's important to do like the stuff people do online and that, because it is about breaking the stigma. And you had an uncle that you related that to alcoholism, so you hated everyone for it, which is fair enough, because you relate a trauma to that. but I've probably got someone out there that doesn't like people that drink and take drugs because of the shit I've done to them. But I can't do stuff about that. All I can do now is move forward and try and inspire other people to change their life around the way I have done. Do you know what I mean? It's an interesting one, but it is about breaking the stigma, getting the word out there. Michael's videos are brilliant as well. I love watching his stuff. It's inspiring.
You guys have changed me as well, because I've not admitted this before, but I did until like the last couple of years. I've always had a problem with straight blokes just because I have always associated them with sort of bullying or like banter that gets out of hand. So it's not that I've disliked them. I've just always been really wary that, okay, banter does get out of hand, and it's normally straight blokes, especially in Essex around here, that I've always had problems, but I've been able to suspend my judgment. And I've got some really close friends who are straight blokes, including yourself, Sam, and some other people I've met in the sober community. And I think, yeah, a lot of this, we have to change our perceptions. I was the worst advocate of men talking about mental health. I used to have an apprentice, and I remember we used to look at the news each morning, and there's often stuff about men and mental health. And I even said to him, why do we have to talk about mental health these days? That's what the pub is for. I said, men shouldn't talk about mental health. They should just go down to the pub and have a few drinks and forget about it. And I even said to him, if you ever see me starting some sort of mental health blog, then feel free to get a gun and shoot me. Those were my words. And like about 4 or 5 years later, I'm regularly blogging about addiction, sobriety, and mental health. So any moment now, he could be coming round with his gun because he has, he has permission to shoot me. But yeah, I think I might have changed a bit since those days, and I feel better for it. And I think
that's all good, surely.
Should talk about mental health, actually.
Well, that's the thing, though. I think, and I've said this many, many times, it's starting to get boring just because I keep saying it. It's just sometimes to help people with their mental health, don't talk about mental health. Just say, how are you? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be, oh, you look depressed and all this kind of stuff. Steve, we've had many conversations, and obviously, I think you're one of the few where I think you've started to realise when I'm starting to have those odd wobbles. But
you're easy for me to figure out now.
Well, there you go. But it's just like, so when I'm having, you know how to just help me out with that one without, you don't have to say, right, Dan, your anxiety's going a little bit skew with. Let's sit down and have a cup of tea. Because I'm just yeah, no.
I'll nip past Sam's, get some cucumber sandwiches with the crust cut off, and pop over and see you.
Yeah, but I think it's me personally. I just think we're just overcomplicating the conversations around mental health. Just sometimes I'm just having a shit day, or this is the problem. Like I know we said about that event where I had a mild panic attack about it the other day. You just like it's ages away, Dan.
I can see some parallels there. What you're saying about just asking people if they're okay and using language that they would use. I'm having similar sort of thoughts at the moment about when I talk about sobriety and recovery. I'm trying to use those words less because it feels like something different for a lot of people. I'm just trying to talk more about not drinking. Yeah. Because people can relate to not drinking. But when you start talking about sobriety and recovery, that's for people who have hit rock bottom and starting over, and they're people who are different from yourselves. But you could just have a bad relationship with alcohol. And if you talk about just not drinking, for example, or not doing drugs, then that's something that a lot more people can relate to. So I'm going through a bit of a shift in my way of thinking about things on those terms. But I think you're right. If you're talking about mental health all the time, people who don't think that they have a mental health problem but are struggling with things, they might just completely disregard everything that's said because it doesn't relate to them. But if they're having a shit day, or if they've had a shit year or a few, then they might relate to that more. So I definitely some parallels.
Yeah, well, it's why. Sorry, I don't want to turn it into a Dan show, to apologise, but that's why as MANUP we very, very rarely talk about suicide. And the reason being is because there are some fantastic charities out there, blah, blah, blah. They're doing a really good job. But when more to do with men's mental health, everybody jumps on suicide. Look at the stats. We know the stats. Other people do that better. Our job as a charity is we try and change minds way, way earlier than that. Not all blokes who are having some sort of mental health problem or just they've got a debt. They're not sure whether they're drinking too much and all this kind of stuff. Do you get what I mean? It's like, okay, well, if you're asking that question, probably you are drinking too much. Speak to Sam. Go and jump in the sea with that mental patient over there and all this kind of stuff. It'll help. Do you get what I mean? But it's just not.
I don't know what I say in videos and what I put out. I generally believe that the right person will hear it, the video, who it's meant for. So all anyone can really do is say their truth and their life and put it out there. And the right person, even if that video helps one person, then you've done your good job. But I truly believe you just got to just say it out is what you believe and put it out there, and it will fall onto the right ears. Because
completely agree, 100%. Don't dress it up. Don't put it in flowery language and all the rest of it. If it's shit, it's shit. Tell people it's shit, and people will go, yeah, mine's shit. I get
what both of Dan and Michael was saying, and I do, but I just don't overthink it, because then if I get to my point where I start to overthink it, I end up don't doing the video. And I'd really like to think that that will help someone that's watching it. I get loads of messages of people saying, it's that so as well. So I just don't overthink it too much, and I just put out what I'm feeling and what I'm saying, thinking that day, and whoever needs to hear it, like I say, I truly believe that's the way the universe works, and that will land in the phone of someone that needs to listen to that message that day.
I think you're exactly right there as well. So on my blog, I try and share lots of people's stories of recovery or sobriety or whatever you want to call it. Some will have come through like the AA, others will have done it completely different ways, and I try to include as wide as possible a selection of voices, because some people will relate to me, some people will relate to you, they might not relate to both of us, but if you've got a wide selection of voices and experiences, then there will always be someone that you can relate to, and it might not be the same person for everyone. So I think that's why it's really important to have
so important. That's why I share everyone else's videos and that as well, because some people, it's just human nature. Some people might find my voice really annoying, might not like me as a person, but if I share some other videos, they might like them and they can follow their journey and get something from them as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's important to share as much as other people's stuff as well, because you're helping other people in that way as well, Yeah,
we've rocketed off in time here, considering we were going to try and constrain it to 20 minutes.
It's Sam's fault. It keeps going on, doesn't it?
Shut up, mate. Once I start talking, I can't stop.
It's good, man. It is
cool.
Good, isn't it? But
Amy, did you just want to wrap up? And I think we've got ourselves a nice little video here.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like a lot of the issue with it is around stereotypes, isn't it? Was kind of the summary I've got from it, that the stereotypes that we enforce on people, trying to label everything, trying to put everything in boxes, is a big part of the problem. And just letting people be how they need to be the best version of themselves is the best way, really. And
just accepting them for whoever they are, what they are, how they are.
Yeah.
You'll either get on with them or you won't get on with them. It's simple as that, isn't it, really?
I think that's the key, though, isn't it? You just can't please. You just can't please everybody,
and you don't have to.
Exactly. Exactly. Point number one.
Right on the head.
Yeah. There you go. Sorted. Oh.
Good stuff.
Are we done? Are we? Or
I think we're done. Yeah.
I'm just going to sit there and be silent.
About 5 minutes.
All right, cool. Let me do the record thing. There we go. Bear me 1 second.